Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, we'll hear from voters throughout the country as President Biden announces his withdrawal from the presidential race. And lawmakers are demanding the director of the Secret Service resign following the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump.
And live pinpoint Doppler radar is showing some rain and thunderstorms across eastern Kentucky. We'll tell you when we can see a break coming up in a few minutes.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. President Joe Biden's announcement that he has dropped his re-election bid left many voters more shocked than surprised. CBS's Mark Strassman begins our coverage.
He's a true patriot for stepping down.
It came as a shock, to be completely honest with you.
I'm just sad.
What'd you think?
Interesting. I thought that most people thought he would push through, but at the same time, I'm not surprised.
Was it the right decision?
I think we'll see.
Ever since the debate, people we talked to have heard rumors and rumblings that the president might step aside. But when it did happen, it was one of those moments that felt both telegraphed and startling.
A lot of people knew there was going to be some big issues here for a long period of time. Should have been planned differently.
I'm not happy because, number one, why they wait so long? Number two is, what's the plan?
For many voters, President Biden's exit and his endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris has changed nothing about which party they'll support.
One of the reasons I voted originally in 2020 for Biden and Kamala was Kamala.
I have voted for Clinton, I have voted for Bush, I have voted for Obama, and guess what? The only one who has stayed true to his word is Trump.
But in crucial battleground states, swing voters have a lot to consider.
Still hard to pay rent. It's hard to, buy groceries with all the inflation that's happening. And I'm looking for someone who would be able to help with those things, and I don't think Trump or Kamala Harris would be able to.
I would be interested to see who her running mate would be as well, to kind of see the whole picture.
Mark Strassman, CBS News, Atlanta.
Former Vice President Mike Pence has praised President Biden's decision to drop out of this year's election. Pence made a post about the president's decision on his X page earlier today, following the assassination attempt of Donald Trump and President Biden not seeking re-election. He said it's time for both parties to send a message of strength and resolve to America's friends and enemies. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is throwing her support behind Vice President Kamala Harris for president. The 84-year-old reportedly worked behind the scenes to get President Biden to withdraw from the race. And today, Pelosi issued her endorsement, saying in part, quote, "It is with immense pride and limitless optimism for our country's future that I endorse Vice President Kamala Harris for the President of the United States," end quote. The Democratic ticket for president got a little less complicated this morning. West Virginia Independent Senator Joe Manchin joined CBS Mornings to talk about a potential presidential run for him. CBS News reported last night that Manchin was getting calls about switching back to the Democratic Party and launching his own run after President Biden stepped aside. But he revealed what he's intending to do to CBS Mornings anchor Tony Dokoupil.
First of all, let me make it very clear to you, Tony, I am not going to be a candidate for president. I'm a candidate for basically speaking for the middle of this country.
Manchin also declined to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris and says a mini primary is the most desirable way for him to pick a new candidate. There's been a lot of reaction on the Democratic side, but what about on the Republican side of things? In a phone conversation with CBS's Robert Costa, former President Donald Trump says the announcement came as a shock to the nation. Trump went on to say he thought that President Biden was pressured out of the race and said he, quote, should not have been our president in the first place. Trump says regardless of how things go on the Democratic side, it would not affect how he proceeds with his campaign. The head of the Secret Service faced a fierce questioning on Capitol Hill today. The House Oversight Committee demanded answers on the security breakdown that failed to prevent an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. As CBS's Nicole Killian reports, calls are increasing for a change of leadership at the Secret Service.
It's going to be the next president. Looks like you guys were cutting corners.
The director of the U.S. Secret Service took responsibility for the security lapse that allowed an attempted assassination against former President Donald Trump.
The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed.
But Director Kimberly Cheadle offered few answers as to how an assassin was able to position himself on a rooftop about 500 feet from the podium.
I'm not going to get into specifics of that day.
Frustrating lawmakers with unanswered questions.
The lack of answers and the lack of report is just simply not something that we can accept here.
Cheadle did reveal agents had been told between 2 and 5 times a suspicious person had been spotted, but Trump was still allowed to take the stage.
If the detail had been past information that there was a threat, the detail would never have brought the former president out onto stage.
You distinguish between someone who is suspicious and someone who's threatening, is that right?
Committee Chair James Comer said the Secret Service needs new leadership.
It has now become the face of incompetence.
Cheadle has been with the Secret Service for nearly 30 years and still has President Biden's support, but multiple lawmakers are calling for her resignation.
I call upon you to resign today.
I believe, Director Cheadle, that you should resign.
The Secret Service has confirmed at times denying Trump campaign requests for more security, but Cheadle says that was not the case on the day of the shooting. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Washington.
In addition to the agency's own investigation into what happened, the Department of Homeland Security has appointed an independent panel to conduct a 45-day review.
After seeing rain push through this past weekend, we started the week off with plenty of rain pushing through in the morning hours. Here's the latest with live pinpoint Doppler radar right now. Well, first of all, we'll get to the temperatures as we're seeing temperatures in the upper 70s and low 80s, 81 in Hazard, 84 Manchester, 83 London. Somerset's checking in with 86. Where we had the rain, much cooler, 73 Middlesbrough, 77 Jonesville, 77 in Harlan. And there's the latest with live pinpoint Doppler radar. You can see some rain over towards the La Folla area. This is pushing its way to the north and northeast, so this is something that we'll be keeping an eye on as we go throughout the next several hours. And in terms of temperature, we'll see temperatures staying around 82 as we go into the 6 o'clock time frame. By midnight, we'll hover right around 72 degrees and then upper 60s by the 6 o'clock hour. When you wake up in the morning, we'll see temperatures in the mid to upper 60s. Now, rain chances continue to be in the forecast, but for how long? I'll have that answer in the First Alert forecast in a few minutes. Steve.
Eric, thanks. A Madison County man is in the hospital after being seriously injured in a motorcycle crash. Kentucky State Police say the other driver was an officer under the influence. On Saturday, Preston Lambert and his friend were riding their motorcycles along Charlie Norris Road in Richmond when a UTV reportedly and abruptly pulled out in front of him. Preston says he did not have much time to brake.
He said that he just closed his eyes and was praying for the best, and he ended up flipping into the side-by-side.
The Madison County Sheriff's Office called in Kentucky State Police to investigate. According to troopers, the driver of the UTV was an off-duty Madison County Sheriff's deputy. Jonathan Thompson was arrested and charged with DUI and assault. The Supreme Court has declined to halt the trial of a prominent 2020 Colorado election denier. Former Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters is facing 10 state charges, including identity theft, criminal impersonation, and attempting to influence a public servant. The Colorado Secretary of State has accused Peters of facilitating the security breach in the county's elections office in May 2021. Peters pleaded not guilty. Her trial is set to begin on July 29th. Karen Reed was back in court for a hearing earlier today, just weeks after a judge declared a mistrial in her case. Reed is facing multiple charges, including second-degree murder, after prosecutors claim she rammed John O'Keefe with her vehicle in a snowstorm back in 2022. O'Keefe, who was Reed's boyfriend at the time, was an officer for the Boston Police Department. She was accused of killing O'Keefe by striking him with her SUV. O'Keefe was later found outside the home of another police officer with Boston PD. A crowd of postal workers rallied in Chicago today after one of their own was shot and killed. 48-year-old Octavia Redmond was shot multiple times outside a South Side home while delivering mail Friday. The wife and grandmother worked as a letter carrier for more than 15 years. The National Association of Letter Carriers Union says more than 140 letter carriers have been attacked on the job in Chicago since August 2022. 53% of parents with school-aged children say in a new survey they would go into debt to pay for extracurricular activities. We'll have some advice to help you spend less.
And we're getting a few peaks of sunshine across eastern Kentucky. Now, rain chances continue in the forecast. We'll tell you how long they'll last in the First Alert forecast in a few minutes. Stay with us.